Hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Understanding Anti-Bribery Management Systems under ISO 37001. My name is George, and I'm an International Sales Manager here at SoftExpert. Today's webinar will be presented by Mr. Gus Oliveira. Gus has over 10 years of experience in the financial and business development field, working in large companies both in the United States and in Brazil as a financial analyst, business strategy consultant, and a project consultant. Have a great webinar. Hello, Gus.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another SoftExpert webinar. Today's webinar discusses anti-bribery management systems, a topic that has sparked a lot of interest in the market lately. We're going to talk a little bit about bribery and corruption, which is an evil that has detrimental effects on many countries around the world. This is one of the reasons why ISO 37001 emerged, which we will learn more about it in this presentation. Well, everyone, this is the agenda that will guide our webinar today. Basically, the presentation is divided into 3 stages. The first part, we'll start talking about the global bribery scenario. Next, we'll talk about ISO 37001 and cover the key components of anti-bribery management systems according to the standard. And finally, we'll look at how SoftExpert can help your company implement an anti-bribery management system. Transparency International is a non-governmental organization, and perhaps many of you have heard of it. This NGO is responsible for creating the Corruption Perception Index, or CPI, which consists of an organized list of the most corrupt countries in the world and the places where these problems are found to a lesser degree. In the 2017 edition, 180 countries were evaluated. The CPI uses some specific criteria such as surveys and interviews with experts, businessmen, politicians, and others, along with public actions to promote transparency and combat corruption, register cases, and comparisons between the countries surveyed, among others. Each country is rated with the grade ranging from 0, which means they are very corrupt, to 100, which means they're very clean. According to the survey conducted in 2017, the most corrupt countries in the world are, respectively, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, Afghanistan, Yemen, Libya, and North Korea. Among the least corrupt countries in the world are New Zealand, Denmark, Finland, Switzerland, Sweden, and Canada, all scoring more than 80 points. Although many developed countries also suffer from this problem, if we look closely at the global CPI data, we can see that there's a correlation between underdevelopment and corruption. In the African continent, many governments are undemocratic and invest a large part of their resources in arms, diverting a large amount of public funds to serve the interests of their politicians, including humanitarian aid sent by other countries, the UN, and by other international entities. According to estimates by the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, $1 to $2 trillion are paid in bribes every year around the world. Considering other corrupt practices as well, they estimate that the amount of lost resources due to corruption results in an economic loss many times greater. I have already mentioned the terms bribery and corruption a few times, but what is the relationship between the two? The terms are directly related, but in some cases, they are misapplied and lead to doubts. Bribery is a type of corruption. It can be defined as an illegal practice in which an individual is induced to practice a certain act in exchange for some advantage. It usually involves money, but it can also involve other benefits such as services, trips, or material goods. The occurrence of bribery in the public service is quite common. A police officer who catches a motorist driving over the speed limit accepts a bribe payment to not write a ticket. A public official accepts the payment of a certain amount of money to move to the front of the line and prioritize the issuing of a document for a citizen, or let's say a passport or a driver's license, for example. A municipal inspector who identifies a bar or industry operating in a residential area but accepts a trip to allow the establishment to operate illegally. A judge who receives a luxury car to reduce the sentence of a drug trafficker, or to judge a corrupt politician as innocent. But bribery can also occur in the private sector. For example, a salesperson of a company that offers a buyer from another company money or a gift to get their business. When a system is corrupted, it becomes weakened and results in a series of negative consequences that can affect the lives of citizens, society, and the economy of a country. A good example is healthcare provided for its citizens. Money diverted into bribes is not invested in education, so newly trained physicians may not be adequately or sufficiently prepared. They also do not receive adequate remuneration and, consequently, are not motivated to provide quality service for the population. Dishonest acts frequently also prevent the medicine needed for treatment from being available, and as a result, people end up suffering and being harmed. Respect is one of the fundamental values in social life. When authorities engage in corruption, citizens lose confidence and fail to respect them because they believe they do not defend the common interest. And finally, corruption also hurts the economy. When an investor is aware of a history of corruption in a city or country, he fails to invest due to the lack of confidence. The process involved in the issuance of licenses and project approvals to set up a new industry usually drag on for months. The agencies responsible will hold up activities until they receive money or other illicit benefits. Generally speaking, where there is corruption, there are also infrastructural problems. This impedes the growth of the company as well as the development of the region, since everything is delayed because of the need to pay bribes. So, what is an anti-bribery management system? Despite the existence of a large number of regulations and laws that endeavor to combat and prevent such practices, they have not been able to prevent the growing repercussions from corruption involving large corporations. Many organizations have become concerned with demonstrating that they do not commit and are not part of illicit practices. In this sense, these laws and regulations have proven to be insufficient to help organizations demonstrate that they are compliant. And that's why anti-bribery management systems came along. They were developed to establish an anti-bribery culture within organizations. With them, appropriate controls are implemented which aim to increase the chances of detecting bribes and reducing their occurrences. To allow organizations and institutions to survive in both public and private sector, society is increasingly demanding transparency. To this end, ISO 37001 is a standard that provides requirements and guidelines for organizations seeking to establish, implement, maintain, and improve anti-bribery management systems. The standard is based on best practices around the world. It includes a series of measures and controls aimed at increasing the chances of detecting bribes and reducing their occurrences. It covers two aspects: bribes paid by the organization, its personnel, or business partners acting on behalf of the organization or for its benefits, and bribes paid to the organization, its personnel, or business partners related to activities of the organization. So, does ISO 37001 guarantee immunity to bribery? Unfortunately, ISO 37001 does not guarantee that the practice of bribery carried out by the company or suffered by the company will not occur. It is the same as a company that implements a quality management system based on ISO 9001. You cannot guarantee that their products or services are free of quality issues. However, an anti-bribery management system in operation can significantly reduce the chances of dishonest acts occurring. Now, let's look at the key components of ISO 37001. as this standard adheres to the high-level structure, anyone who has contact with ISO 9001 from 2015 will be able to understand this new standard. Clause 4, context of the organization. Part of the preliminary work involved in implementation of an anti-bribery management system begins by understanding and documenting the context of the organization. In other words, it's essential to understand what affects the company externally, for example, legal, cultural, social, market, and competitiveness issues, and the economic environment in which the company operates, as well as internal issues involving the culture and the values of the organization. At this stage, it's also essential to understand the needs and expectations of stakeholders, namely the stakeholders, collaborators, customers, and suppliers. The standard also emphasizes the importance of risk management. At this point, the bribery risk should be identified, evaluated, and prioritized. The risk assessments should also be documented and reviewed periodically, especially in cases of significant changes in the structure or activities of the organization. Clause 5, leadership. Clause 5 addresses leadership within an anti-bribery management system. It is not enough that the people at the top of the organization who control and run the business simply support the system. It's critical that they are active and involved in the process. The standard is also explicit when it establishes that people with responsibility and authority for operating the system should have direct and immediate access to the board of directors and senior management to communicate relevant information and facts. Responsibility for implementing the anti-bribery management system involves everyone from board members to directors and managers. But also, all the people who work in the company are responsible for compliance with the anti-bribery policy. ISO 37001 differentiates the non-executive supervisory body, such as the board of directors, for example, and the executive body, such as senior management. The board of directors is responsible for improving and reviewing the anti-bribery policy, as well as overseeing the management systems 5.1.1. Senior management is responsible for implementing the policy and ensuring that it is effectively complied with 5.1.2. If the organization does not have the two separate bodies, senior management should fill in for both obligations. If the organization does not have the two separate bodies, senior management should fulfill both obligations. Clause 6, planning. Before the anti-bribery management system can be implemented, it needs to be planned. This is what Clause 6 of ISO 37001 addresses. This includes steps such as determining which anti-bribery laws apply to the company, determining the kinds of bribes the system should prevent, understanding the nature of the organization and its activities, understanding the needs of the organization stakeholders, evaluating the risks of bribery the organization faces, determining the scope and objectives of the anti-bribery management system, and planning and defining the necessary anti-bribery controls. When planning an anti-bribery system, organizations should take steps to identify and evaluate their bribery risks. ISO 37001 encourages organizations to categorize risks according to different levels from low to high. For example, employees of an organization who interact with clients or public bodies are likely to present a bribery risk that is medium or high, especially if their remuneration is paid on a commission basis. The organization can then determine what level and type of anti-bribery controls is more appropriate for each risk category. If the controls already exist, their efficiency can now be evaluated. If the controls are not showing satisfactory results, they can be improved. In certain cases, it may be necessary for the organization to review its strategies in order to ensure that the risk of bribery is reduced to a level that can be adequately managed by existing anti-bribery controls or by new controls that may be defined. Clause 7, support. Clause 7 addresses certain aspects of support for companies to comply with. To comply with the standard, organizations must provide adequate resources to establish, implement, maintain, and improve their systems on an ongoing basis. There should be adequate training and communication of the anti-bribery management system, and the information provided should be documented. 3 aspects in particular may require some adjustment so that the processes are in accordance with the requirements of ISO 37001. The first involves the role of anti-bribery compliance. This role is similar to what existed in previous version of ISO 9001, which was known as management representative. The standard requires that this role be filled by people who have the necessary abilities, status, authority, and independence, and this should be part of the system documentation. Specifically, the standard requires the following. A. Determine the necessary abilities and skills for people to carry out their work from an anti-bribery perspective. B. Ensure that such persons possesses these abilities through appropriate education, training, or experience. C. When applicable, take measures to develop and maintain the necessary abilities. And D. Keep documented information that serves as evidence and which demonstrates that the person has the abilities in questions. The second is the due diligence requirement. It can be understood as a process in which a person or company is investigated in depth through the study, analysis, and evaluation of information and documents in order to understand the level of bribery risk. All employees holding positions exposed to the risk of bribery, determined as medium or high risk, and persons acting in the role of anti-bribery compliance should be subject to this process. Specifically, all employees holding positions exposed to the risk of bribery, determined as medium or high risk, and persons acting in the role of anti-bribery compliance should be subject to this process. Specifically, individuals should be subject to the due diligence process before being hired or before being transferred or promoted by the organization in order to verify and ensure that it is appropriate to employ or transfer the individual and that they will comply with the requirements of the policy and the anti-bribery management system. And finally, the anti-bribery policy must be made available to all employees and business partners of the organization. It must be communicated directly to employee and business partners who are exposed to medium and high probability bribery risks, and it should be published using the company's internal and external communication channels. Clause 8, Operation. Clause 8 addresses the operation of ISO 37001. It includes due diligence and controls, financial and non-financial, as well as registering suspected or actual cases of bribery. It also covers the issue of gifts and donations, as well as the management and investigation of occurrences. Under this clause, there are 2 areas that an organization may need to address with special attention: due diligence and supply chain compliance. Due diligence is a key component of the standard, and it should be performed whenever there is any risk of bribery in business transactions, projects, activities, or relations with business partners or people connected to the organization. When bribery risks cannot be managed using the means described in the standard, the organization should take appropriate measures to terminate, discontinue, suspend, or cancel the relationship as soon as possible. In the case of a new proposed relationship, activity, project, or transaction, the organization should postpone or refuse the business relationship. The level of depth and detail of due diligence should be applied in accordance with the level of the risk. Low-risk business partners, such as retail customers or suppliers, generally do not require detailed inspection. However, due diligence on business partners who act on behalf of the organization or for its benefit will likely require a more comprehensive effort. In the case of supply chain compliance, organizations are obliged to guarantee adequate systems beyond their limits, that is, for all organizations over which have direct or indirect control. For non-controlled business partners where the risk of bribery is high, the organization should sign a commitment and require the partner to implement controls related to the transactions, project, or activity with the aim of preventing the occurrence of bribery. This can be done through training and the application of controls over payments, donations, gifts, or similar benefits. In the case of business partners involved in large, complex jobs where the risk of bribery is high, the organization may require the partner to implement controls equivalent to those required by ISO 37001. An organization normally imposes these requirements on the partner as a precondition for signing a contract. In cases where an organization does not have sufficient influence to demand these commitments from large clients or suppliers, this should be considered as a relevant factor in evaluating the risk of bribery and due diligence. Also, according to the regulation, the organization should implement procedures that are designed to prevent the giving or receiving of gifts, hospitality, donations, or similar benefits that may be perceived as a bribe. Companies should stipulate value limits for giving or receiving gifts and should also instruct employees on how to act in these situations. Clause 9. This clause addresses the ABMS performance assessment. Organizations should periodically evaluate the anti-bribery management systems, either by means of an internal audit or by an independent but competent external entity. These audits consist of processes that evaluate the procedures, controls, and systems for A. Bribery or suspected bribery, B. Non-compliance with the requirements of the anti-bribery system, C. Failure of compliance by business partners in relation to the applicable requirements of the organization, and D. Weaknesses or opportunities to improve the anti-bribery management system. According to the standard, the organization should determine what needs to be monitored and measured, who is responsible, and the methods for monitoring and measuring. Clause 10, improvement. The last clause addresses nonconformities and ongoing improvement. When nonconformity occurs, the organization should react immediately and take steps to control and correct the deviation. It should assess whether there is a need for action to eliminate the cause or causes of the nonconformity. If applicable, the actions should be implemented and followed up with verification to evaluate the effectiveness of the actions. If necessary, improvements should be made to the policy or anti-bribery management systems to prevent and avoid the reoccurrence of this type of deviation. According to the standard, the organization should work continuously to ensure the adequacy, sufficiency, and effectiveness of the anti-bribery management system. Improvements can be identified during the internal audits and in critical review meetings by management or the people involved in the anti-bribery compliance. It's important that whenever the need to improve the ABMS is identified, the improvement should be planned and implemented. So, how can SoftExpert help your company? We've now reached the third and final stage of this presentation, and now we will look at how SoftExpert can help your company overcome the challenges involved in implementing and maintaining an anti-bribery management system. SoftExpert developed the SoftExpert Excellence Suite, which is an integrated solution that allows for companies to comply with the critical requirements of the anti-bribery management system. With modeling and automation, it's possible to standardize processes and simplify their management. With standardized processes, the company is able to promote transparency and prevent bribery. All information related to process can be controlled, such as inputs and outputs, indicators, costs, and documents. The solution also helps in the elaboration and approval of the anti-bribery policy. It can be published and shared with all employees and business partners of the company, ensuring that everyone has access to and knowledge of the policy and other documents that are part of the anti-bribery management system, such as internal standards or procedures, thus ensuring compliance with the requirements of ISO 37001. Furthermore, SE Suite notifies everyone involved whenever any changes or improvements are implemented in the anti-bribery policy. In addition to ensuring access to the policy, the solution assists in the effective management of training. Thus, stakeholders can know the policy in detail, where the risk of bribery may occur, and what damage they may cause to those involved and to the organization. With training, people will know how to recognize, prevent, and avoid these circumstances. The solution also complies with other items such as 4.5 and 8.2 of ISO 37001, which addresses risk assessment. It manages the entire risk management cycle from the moment the organization needs an overview of its entire business and its business partners, identifying and evaluating the potential bribery risks faced by the organization, to the management of detailed risks involving business or transactions with customers or suppliers, and also when due diligence is required. It provides flexibility for managing different risk plans, applying different assessment methods, and managing the validity of the plan, among other functions. For significant risks, the solution allows you to define controls and monitor their implementation. SoftExpert Suite also automates the entire due diligence process. It does this by providing tools for creating questionnaires that can be sent out to business partners in order to provide a more comprehensive assessment of the nature and extent of bribery risks. The entire process takes place in an automated manner, and the results from due diligence can be used as guidelines for subsequent risk assessments. The solution also automates the entire audit process. It helps define the criteria and scope of each audit and the selection of competent auditors to conduct the audits, ensuring the objectivity and impartiality of the process. The solution helps the auditor evaluate the anti-bribery management system and to identify the practice of bribery or suspected cases, as well as identify breaches of the anti-bribery policy, non-compliance by business partners, weaknesses in the systems, and opportunities for improvement. Like the standard, the solution is very flexible and allows each organization to establish the best way to manage nonconformities. To do this, it provides tools like Ishikawa and 5 Whys to help identify the causes of noncompliance. Knowing the causes, the company can define action plans to address the root causes of the nonconformity. Finally, anti-bribery management system indicators can be monitored, and if the objectives and results are not being achieved, improvements can also be defined. Well, everyone, we've come to the end of this webinar. I hope that in this brief presentation, I was able to highlight what ISO 37001 is, how it works, and the key aspects it addresses. If you have any questions, or if you'd like to learn more about SoftExpert solutions for anti-bribery management systems, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you once again for your attention, and until next time.
Thank you, Gus, and thanks to all of you who took part in this presentation. If you have any questions or would like to get in touch with Mr. Oliveira, please email him at gustavo.oliveira@softex.com. j.oliveira@softexpert.com. For more webinars, please visit our website, www.softexpert.com. See you next time.